Here we go. Stipe, Daniel Cormier 3, former two-division champ Daniel Cormier looking to ride off into the sunset as the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. Cleveland's own current heavyweight champ Stipe Miocic knocked out Cormier in his last fight, looking to cement his legacy in this one. Late in round one, Cormier throwing bombs connects with a right that staggers Stipe, but the champ recovers. Live odds after round one, Stipe at -150, Cormier at +110. Late in round two, Miocic on the attack, drops Cormier with a right hook, then starts landing heavy shots, but the round comes to an end, saved by the horn. Big round for Miocic. Stipe now -450 after round two, DC +300. Late in round three, Stipe taking over, landing a hard one too, but hits Cormier with an eye poke in the process. Oh, that's nasty. Huge turning point in the fight. Cormier couldn't see. Round four, Cormier coming back to life, lands a big overhand right, but Stipe returns. Strong, heavy hands from Stipe Miocic. In round five, both men exhausted in the clinch, throwing whatever they've got, emptying the tank. What a championship fight. In the end, Stipe Miocic still the heavyweight champion, cementing himself as the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. Fourth defense of the heavyweight title. What a fight that was. Miocic winning via unanimous decision. Most popular wager was Cormier money line, 46% of the tickets, but it is Miocic who gets his hand raised in the trilogy as he wins 2 of the 3 fights in this epic trilogy. Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier had a heck of a history as Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic fight for the final time, and it's Stipe Miocic getting the best of DC, winning 2 of the last 3 fights. And I'll tell you what, these are 2 of the greatest UFC heavyweights of all time. It was a fight for the ages, but it is Stipe who ends up the champion in the UFC heavyweight division, as Daniel Cormier will have to ride off into the sunset dealing with this loss. Says, that'll be it for me. But what a career it was for Daniel Cormier. Certainly a Hall of Famer, but Stipe Miocic, the champ once again. Let's get some instant analysis. Welcome in our heavy hitters, UFC Hall of Famer Rashad Evans, CBS Sports combat analyst Brian Campbell. What a fight that was. Stipe Miocic finishes off Daniel Cormier to retain the heavyweight championship, standing as the greatest heavyweight in UFC history. Now, Cormier said post-fight that that was his last fight of his remarkable career. BC, what's your reaction to how this title fight went down?
My reaction is crown him, right? Stipe Miocic is who we said he would be if he got a victory here, the greatest heavyweight in UFC history. And look, what he has done so many times in his career is show those championship intangibles. I believe the key to this fight was not only the adjustments he made, but more importantly, he refused to allow Daniel Cormier to establish his will and take control of this fight. Yes, they both had some big moments on the feet, but Cormier never went back to the wrestling that he had success with in that first fight. And I think a lot of those reasons come down to Stipe Miocic. He came in maybe the best shape we'd seen him in these 3 fights, and he went out there and does exactly what he does great. If you give him an opening, he'll take it. But he's also willing to outlast you. He was in better shape, he had a better game plan, and he made the better adjustments. Stipe Miocic, for all the times we picked against him or maybe undervalued him for his lack of marketability, he's as blue collar and perfect as a champion as it gets inside that cage.
Rashad, they traded eye pokes, but it was the one that Cormier caught from Stipe that was critical in round 3. He said he couldn't see out of his left eye when they asked him after the fight. He could not see at all. Is that why Cormier lost this fight, or was there more to it?
It was more to it, but I think that definitely contributed to it. You know, if you want to go why he lost the fight, you have to look at the way that Stipe started the fight off. You know, he came out in control right away, working his distance, working his range, and being the bigger fighter. Getting DC against the cage and putting DC in positions which you would typically think going into this fight that DC would have the advantage of against the cage, being the better wrestler. But Stipe was a bigger fighter and landing those big shots, and DC got caught in the cage. And I think that also contributed to that eye being hurt the way that it was. the fact that when he got caught at the end of the second round, it was that same left eye that he got poked with in round 3. So I think it was a little bit of compound danger injury from that eye poke early. I mean, from that punch earlier. So I do believe that Stipe, you know, he went in there, he fought a great fight, and he went in there and just got his hands raised by fighting his fight, by being a bigger fighter.
Rashad, what's that like for a fighter? Take me into the octagon there. You get poked in the eye like that, because that was, I mean, that was nasty. Because we saw the eye poke that Daniel Cormier gave to Stipe in round 1, but the one in round 3 from Stipe to Cormier, I mean, that was nasty. What's that like for a fighter in the octagon when you can't see out of your left eye?
It's kind of scary, to be honest, because, you know, I thought at the end of the second round, you know, DC had a little double vision, but then definitely when he got poked in the eye, he couldn't see. And you can see just the way his eye was even looking when he was opening. It looked like it was just kind of halfway open. He couldn't open it all the way. And when your eye is out like that, you can't see anything coming from Stipe's right eye, so right arm. So therefore, it took away DC's ability to fight from his left and use that jab effectively. That left jab that he used to do so well, that he would go to the collar tie, and then from the collar tie, he'll land a big shot. He was able to get it, but not so consecutively, and not being able to control Stipe's big right arm. And I think the big problem was because he couldn't see and gauge where that arm was.
Cormier said this fight would define him. He said this was his last fight, quote, "That'll be it for me." BC, how does this loss impact his legacy?
Look, it's hard to nitpick when you're talking about a guy that we're telling you is a 2-division champion, an all-time great. But there are things that separate people, and we said this was the most prestigious fight in UFC history for a reason. Had Daniel Cormier won, we're talking about him in that conversation of the 4 or 5 greatest fighters to ever do it. But with a loss, it's hard to say this, but DC does become the bridesmaid historically in 2 divisions. Yes, he won a title at both 205 and heavyweight with the UFC, and has shown us his only losses have come against the great Jon Jones twice and Stipe Miocic twice. But he's also been definitively number 2 in his era in both divisions. You're not going to hold that against him. He's still a Hall of Famer, but there was a lot at stake, and he took the loss. And while I'm definitely going to give him respect for the heart he showed in fighting through the eye poke, I do think you have to be honest about karma and history here. DC had eye poke successfully hurt Stipe in both of the first 2 fights in this rivalry. In fact, Miocic needed surgery, where at some point we were questioning if he would fight on due to those eye pokes. It was almost weird karmic justice. Cormier loses the 2nd straight fight. Oh, by the way, he also abandoned his wrestling and stopped listening to his coaches. I'm not here to tell you DC lost the fight, Stipe didn't win it. But DC, once again, when he does lose, it's only to the very best. And it's typically in heartbreaking fashion, where you can go back to that drawing board and know right away what you did wrong.
Rashad, you're a Hall of Famer. Daniel Cormier, a future Hall of Famer. How will you remember his career?
Well, I mean, he's always the guy, in my opinion, who would rise to the challenge and fight these mammoth guys. You know, the Jon Jones, the Stipe Miocic, whoever you put in front of him, he was a guy. And, you know, when you didn't think he had a chance, he was always one to prove different. You know, DC has surprised me many fights. And the fights that he even lost with Jon Jones, I was very impressed with his effort in those fights, even though he did come up short. But I mean, this whole trilogy with Stipe, it definitely cemented him in a new category and just away from that whole Jon Jones drama, and just kind of put him in a new stratosphere, I would say. You know, being a double champ and everything like that, and everything that came along with that. You know, I think that when you remember DC, you have to remember for him for being a guy who was not small, who was smaller than almost everybody fought, but definitely big on the inside.
BC, we talk about what's next for Daniel Cormier. He's saying he's retiring. That's it for him. Ends a heck of a career. Unfortunately, it's a loss for him. As for Stipe Miocic, his career continues as he retains the UFC heavyweight championship. Do we see him fight Francis Ngannou once again, who Stipe has defeated before?
Well, look, Francis is the #1 contender. He's rolled through everyone since losing to Stipe Miocic, taking another loss after that. He's turned it around. He is knocking people out left and right. The only way Francis Ngannou would not be next is if that man we mentioned, Jon Jones, who had quick Twitter fingers on Saturday night, cheering on DC, and then after the loss and the Stipe win saying, I'll be going after that heavyweight title sooner than later. Certainly, we know that Jones earlier this year made headlines in saying he wants to move up to heavyweight. UFC wasn't ready to pay him for that. Should they make the decision to plug him in? You could do worse, right, than making a Stipe Miocic, Jon Jones heavyweight title bout. Either way, Stipe said during fight week, I'm not retiring. That might be DC's plan. It's not mine. If I win, I'm going to keep going. A lot of big title defenses coming up. And you have to be honest, Hakeem, he may be 37 years old, but he had 5-round stamina, and he was the better fighter. Not just tonight, but in this entire rivalry.
Rashad, what would you like to see? Stipe against Jon Jones or Stipe against Francis Ngannou? We've already seen it before.
I would love to see Jon Jones and Stipe. You know, listen, Jon Jones has been a champion for so long in light heavyweight division, and he almost looked unchallenged there, just bored with it. Went through so many different generations of fighters, myself included, and now here he is at a standstill. It would be exciting to see him getting there with Stipe, and it'd be good to see Stipe getting there with Jon Jones because that will put Stipe in a whole nother level when it comes to marketability and who he is as a fighter and who people think he is. I think that's the thing that's missing with Stipe, with him and the fans, that connection is that big matchup like a Jon Jones where they see him going and laying it all out on the line and going against a guy like Jon Jones.
Man, what a sight that would be. Stipe Miocic against Jon Jones. Sign me up, as BC says. Inject that into my veins right now. Let's go. BC, Rashad, sit tight. Back with you in a moment. Co-main event at UFC 252. Highest profile fight of Marlon Chito Vera's career. His last 7 wins all by stoppage. The Sugar Show making another stop in Las Vegas. Sugar Sean O'Malley putting his perfect 12-0 record on the line against his toughest opponent to date. But in round 1, O'Malley goes to sidestep it, rolls his ankle. Then 30 seconds later, again seems to roll his ankle. Something's wrong here. Under a minute left in round 1, O'Malley throws a right hand but can't keep his balance, falls to the mat. And once O'Malley went to the ground, there was no getting up. Chito lands a huge elbow on the ground, followed by punches. Herb Dean stops the fight, and Chito Vera picks up the first round TKO in the biggest fight of his career, upsetting Sean O'Malley. Vera by KO paid plus 1,200 as O'Malley gets stretchered off after the loss. So an upset win for Chito Vera as Sugar Sean O'Malley suffers an apparent right foot injury. The most popular wager was O'Malley on the money line. He was at minus 300, 71% of the tickets on O'Malley, but it is Vera with the upset at plus 240. And how about the long shot here? Vera by KO TKO at plus 1,200. Junior Dos Santos against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Heavyweight bout. 5th ranked former heavyweight champ Junior Dos Santos has lost his last 2 fights by TKO. 6th ranked Rozenstruik suffered his first career loss to Francis Ngannou, his last fight. That happened in May, knocked out in 20 seconds. In round 1, Dos Santos, the more active fighter, lands an overhand right followed by a left hook. In round 2, Rozenstruik opening up with a flurry of punches. And then with just over a minute left in the second, Rozenstrike connects with a big right hook that drops Dos Santos. Rozenstruik followed him to the ground, finished it with a ground and pound. No bad blood between the former teammates. Rozenstruik wins via 2nd round TKO and bounces back from his loss to Ngannou. Rozenstruik by KO TKO at plus 110. And hey, hope you had him on the money line as well. 52% of the tickets at William Hill on Rozenstruik on the money line as he cashes in with a 2nd round TKO victory. Back here with UFC Hall of Famer Rashad Evans, CBS Sports combat analyst Brian Campbell. Co-main event, Sean O'Malley injures his right foot in round 1. Chito Vera takes advantage, winning via 1st round stoppage, handing O'Malley his first loss. BC, what did you see?
Look, this seemed to end right when it was starting to get good, where we were starting to learn a lot. And we mentioned we had so many questions coming in at 25. Sugar Sean O'Malley looks like a rising star and a future face of this sport. But injuring that right leg and ducking down It was noticeable in which he switched stances. He was favoring it. And when he slipped later in the round, when they broke apart from the clinch, you saw Chito Vera jump in and show you why he had the potential to be one of the names in this already loaded bantamweight division to watch out for. Jumped in with some absolutely savage ground and pound. So it's one of those situations where you're able to raise the stock of Vera, understandably so. He improves to 6-1 in his last 7 fights, but I don't think we came close to really understanding or answering the questions we had coming in of whether Sean O'Malley is just another player in this top 10 long term, or whether he really can be a legitimate title contender over the next year.
Rashad, how did you view what happened here as you see Sean O'Malley making these quick movements, rolls his ankle? We see him suffer there with the right ankle injury, the right foot injury. What did you see in terms of your vantage point?
Well, I mean, before that, he looked absolutely phenomenal, being able to switch stances and move very fluidly in and out and just landing whatever shot he wanted to. But I seen when he went against the cage, it looked almost as if like he rolled his ankle a little bit or did something when he was against the cage, because it looked like he fell down for a second. They didn't really show that in the replay, but that's the first time I noticed that something happened, and I thought he just tripped. But then when he walked back out to the octagon and he threw a kick, then you really notice it when he put it back down that he had no foot there. And you know, at that point, I did admire the fact that he didn't go into panic mode and he kept a very stoic approach, a very stoic nature, and didn't give too much tell that Chito that how bad he was hurting, because Chito didn't swarm him right away. He was very slow how he stalked him and then got him down by the end of the round. But, you know, it's just one of those things that it happens in a fight. And when you're in there, it's just like you're a fighter jet and some of those weapons go down and you still got to find a way to get it done.
BC, you had Chito Vera on your podcast, State of Combat podcast. Download and subscribe today. By the way, I mean, he was no nonsense. He was telling you how hard he's been working, talking about he's got to feed his family. He's ready to prove himself. He doesn't worry about the drama or all the social media stuff. What does this result of this fight mean for both Chito Vera and Sean O'Malley, starting with Chito?
Look, for Chito, this is absolutely massive. This catapults him, or it should, into the top 10. And he's talking about not only trying to win over O'Malley's fans by getting a win here, but maybe getting as high as some top 5 matchups coming his way. Look, he's coming off a close loss to Song Yadong, yet he fought so well, it seemed like UFC rewarded him, putting him in this pay-per-view co-main event spot. And he dramatically came through. In a freak situation like this with an injury, it's easy for a fight to end and you really don't learn anything. I think the manner in which Chito Vera went for that finish and how savage he exploded from top position does allow him to come out of this fight, regardless of that injury, looking like his stock is rising and he did what he had to do. Now, for O'Malley, I mentioned earlier, it just didn't seem to answer the questions. It's certainly a step back from the standpoint that he took a loss. It kills a bit of his momentum, but I certainly don't think it's an eventual derailment. As long as this injury is a small one and he can recover, he can get right back in line. We know he has a huge marketing appeal to the young fans, and he can try to continue to rev that engine for a guy who he just screams star when you look at him, when you see him fight.
Rashad, your top play was Chito Vera, plus 240. You love the value. Here we are again, Mystic Shot once again with Chito Vera.
Hey, I just knew it. You know what it was for me that told me that this was going to be different was how he responded to how O'Malley was trash talking. And he was just kind of like, listen, I'm from a big family and this is how we go at it. You know, I got thick skin. But just how he was just so super composed and not getting caught up in the whole back and forth and not getting caught up in the whole hype that was Sean O'Malley. Those are the kind of intangibles that you look for when a guy's going to step on the line. And that's when I knew he was going to be very hard and very unflappable when it came to fight time.
Good for you, Mystic Shad, plus 240. That's some nice value. Also on the main card, Jairzinho Rozenstruik knocks out Junior Dos Santos in round 2 of their heavyweight bout. In his previous fight, Rozenstruik got knocked out by Francis Ngannou in May in just 20 seconds. Rashad, I asked you if Rozenstruik would avenge that loss on Saturday night. You said he would. What made you believe Rozenstruik would bounce back?
I just knew, you know, with Rozenstruik, he's such a heavy striker, and you know he's going to land that strike. It may take almost 3 or 4 rounds, but he's going to land that big strike, and he did land that big strike. You know, I knew that JDS would be the sharper fighter, and he was a sharper fighter early out, and it kind of was concerning me a bit. But, you know, with that big power, punching power that Biggie has, it's just so hard to punch with a guy like that.
Yeah, Biggie Boy was on brand. Look, he's a savage finisher, and it didn't matter that he was at times seemingly outclassed in the striking on this, or that he still has a lot of answers to give us long-term about can he evolve from a raw finisher to more of a guy who can go rounds as if he has to and be a legitimate title contender. Look, let's be honest. He has the type of raw power where that may not matter at the end of the day. Yes, he coming off the quick loss to Francis Ngannou, but everybody loses to Francis Ngannou in that manner. This was the perfect win for him to bounce back. He's going to have to continue to grow in a short period of time, but you know that heavyweight division, you can age a little bit later. You can take that time and figure it out, and this was a big win to get back in where 2 straight losses could have been a lot more destructive in the big picture.
UFC 252 in the books. BC, Rashad, great stuff as always. Thank you.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.